Microphone. Ukraine is the most tolerant nation. On the one hand, we have the situation of war with the country neighbor. On the other hand, we see people in this country who we can call not enemies but friends, and people that we have big hopes for. And one of such persons, the person who doesn't need to be introduced, is Ilya Yashin. And he will continue on what he has come to Ukraine with, but now this time this is the completed final report. And people in Ukraine know how this report was being accomplished. Thank you. I'm happy to welcome you all. Every time I'm very pleased to come to Kiev. It's really a big pleasure to deal with all of you. I came to present and to tell you about the report Putin War, which we have prepared and published in Russia and Moscow. We had these presentations in many Russian cities in Moscow, Petersburg, Yaroslavl, Nizhny Novgorod. We have planned to make more presentations. That is the report on which Boris Nemtsov started to work, the report which he hoped to finish and publish. And that is, according to Nemtsov, was his peacekeeping role, to which is so important for our countries. But I would like to start from not the report itself, but from investigation of the tragic event, the murder of Boris Nemtsov, which took place on the 20th of February in Moscow, in Zamoskvoretsky Bridge. At the first stage, the investigation managed to have some significant progress. During quite brief period of time, the investigators and the representatives of Russian special services managed to detain those people who were real executors of the murder. Short time after the murder, the deputy head of Chechen battalion Sever, Zaur Dadayev, was detained, and some of his accomplices. Our lawyers were involved into this case. They examined the materials collected by investigators, and we have no doubts that Zaur Dadayev is the executor of the murder. He is the person who shot 4 bullets that deprived Nemtsov of life. At the first stage, the investigators managed to have a clear link of suspects which go directly to the city of Grozny of Chechen Republic of Russian Federation. Shortly before the killing, Zaur Dadayev arrived to Moscow 3 days before the murder. Zaur Dadayev came to Moscow together with Ruslan Geremeyev, who is the nephew of the chairman of the Federation of Chechen Republic. 3 days before the murder, they stayed in one apartment, and then a day after the murder, they left Moscow for Ingushetia, for Nazran. But Geremeyev managed to get to Chechnya, because immediately after Nazran he went to Chechen Republic. Dadayev stayed in Ingushetia, and he was detained there by the representatives of Russian special services. Practically immediately, the investigators could follow the trace of Geremeyev, and he is now of great interest for Russian investigators, but investigators failed to do any investigation actions against him. Ruslan Geremeyev, when he was in Chechnya, he was protected by the militants of Kadyrov's law enforcement bodies. For several weeks, he was in Zhalka village, that is the village of one of the most influential clans under the protection of armed militants of Ramzan Kadyrov. As soon as investigators traced this person, they were trying to get access to him for necessary investigatory actions. They failed to do that because the investigator physically was not allowed to go to Geremeyev. Sometime later, Ruslan Geremeyev left, as we know, the territory of Russia, went to one of the Arab countries. Where he is now, it's not identified, even though, as far as we know, the investigators are trying to find out where he is in order to do interrogation and to detain this person. And he is a key suspect today. From our point of view, from Geremeyev, the direct trace goes to Delimkhanov brothers. Aligbek Delimkhanov is the commander of Sever Battalion, the direct commander of the dive, who is detained in Geremeyev, who is one of the main obvious suspects. From Aligbek Delimkhanov, the direct trace goes to Adam Delimkhanov. He is the member of the State Duma. He is one of the key politicians surrounding Ramzan Kadyrov, the person who informally is in charge of the whole law enforcement bloc of Chechen Republic. From Adam Delimkhanov, the direct trace goes to the highest Chechen offices, and now we insist that there should be the investigation against Geremeyev, Gilikbek and Adam Delimkhanov, and the most important thing is they need to interrogate Ramzan Kadyrov. We believe that Ramzan Kadyrov is the key witness in the criminal case of Nemtsov, with the perspective to become the suspect. We do not believe that there is a probability that all these people could be part of that murder without informing Ramzan Kadyrov, without having a direct sanction from Kadyrov. For us, it is a big question whether Ramzan Kadyrov could be involved into this murder, into this crime, without having approval from the civil servants, from the highest Russian offices. For us, the question is open whether Ramzan Kadyrov could receive the approval in the highest Kremlin office. Could he get an approval of Vladimir Putin? But the nearest task of the investigation is to interrogate Ramzan Kadyrov. If this interrogation is not done, that will be an evidence that the investigation is conducting investigation actions exclusively against the executors of this murder. For us, it will be obvious that identification, search, and collection of evidence against the organizers and the orderers of this murder is not going on. I will be open with you. We don't have a lot of optimism related to this investigation, and also there are people changed in the investigatory group. A few days ago, the General Krasnov was dismissed from the leadership of the group, and he was basically the person who detained the first suspects, and he is replaced by Tucheyev, who was investigating the murder case of a person who's a personal enemy of Ramzan Kadyrov, and we have not stated neither organizers or orderers of the crime, and that is why the fact that Tuchevich is appointed as the head of the investigation group does not add a lot of optimism, and we believe that there will be no investigatory actions done. And also Putin demonstratively awarded Kadyrov with the Order of Honor, despite what I described, the conflict between Ramzan Kadyrov and Russian law enforcers. You know that a few days ago Ramzan Kadyrov stated that Chechen investigators have to start firing at their colleagues from other regions, including from Moscow, if the actions of federal law enforcers are not approved by him personally, Ramzan Kadyrov. That caused a big scandal in Russian society. There was a protest of the law enforcers, but in the result, yesterday Ramzan Kadyrov, personally from Vladimir Putin, received the highest state award. Understanding that the specificity of Russian policy is such that the orders of Nemtsov's murder will not be established, will not be made responsible, we do not exclude that in the nearest months, at the initiative of our party, we will initiate the international investigation under UN, so that everyone who was involved into murder of our friend, tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, all of them are to be made responsible. We understand while Putin is in the Kremlin, those who ordered the crime will be not in prison, and the practice of political murders will continue. It is for us the matter of honor to make the murderers of Nemtsov responsible, and also the work on the report Putin Vaina, which Nemtsov planned to publish, is what we have to do. Nemtsov was the author of such genre expert reports. He wrote about dozens of expert reports dedicated to corruption and abuse. The last of his reports was named "The Life of the Slave on Galera," and he was describing everything that Vladimir Putin has, the yurts, the palaces. It was all systematized, all the photographs were there. There were photographs made from the air. He was the author of reports, Putin corruption, Putin the results. Nemtsov was a great patriot of Russia. He was the defender of national interests of our country. But at the same time, Nemtsov loved Ukraine. He loved these people, he loved the culture, he loved the language. He frequently visited Kyiv and other Ukrainian cities. One of his latest trips to Ukraine was to Odessa, to the concert of Okeanelzy group, and he loved Ukraine, and he really was suffering because of that conflict into which Putin involved our country against the Ukraine. Nemtsov was looking for ways and methods of how to explain to Russian society the truth, how to explain what's happening in the east of Ukraine in reality. Nemtsov saw this report as the way of telling the truth to our compatriots. Nemtsov believed that the direct dialogue between Russian opposition and Russian society will allow to change the public opinion in Russia, and this way will influence the foreign policy of Putin. Nemtsov and we all understand that realistically to change Putin's policy is possible only via the pressure inside Russia, via changing the public opinion in Russia, not via pressure of Western politicians, only changing the public opinion. Only that is really important and painful for Russian president. The Russian society is in aggressive, toxic information environment. The people who disagree with Putin's policy in the east of Ukraine, those who disagree with joining Crimea to Russia, are openly called the fifth column, the national betrayers, and that is Vladimir Putin who's responsible for the atmosphere of hatred, because he introduced these terms. Vladimir Putin is making different parts of Russian society to clash, provoking the civil confrontation inside the country. Putin is the constructor, the designer of the political system where any disagreement with his policy is perceived as national high treason. But our point of view is that the betrayal of national interests of Russia is the policy of Putin. We insist that the bloody adventure in the east of Ukraine, into which our country is involved, is the betrayal of the national interests of our country. The political and economic damage caused by Russia, the installation in which Russia is directly harmed the national interests of my country. Russia is interested in normal neighborly relations with Ukraine and other countries. Russia is interested in being open, civilized European country. That is the alternative which Russian democratic opposition and the RPR-PARNAS party offered to Russian society. And the work in this direction is that report. I wouldn't want to talk about the content of the report because, as you understand, the target audience of our report is not Ukrainian society, not Western society, not the Kremlin. We are not trying to prove to Putin that he sends Russian troops to Ukraine. Putin knows that. But our task is to disseminate that information in Russian society. And that is why we were trying hard to include into this booklet all the evidence of Putin's lies that there are no Russian troops on the territory of Ukraine. The report presents the witnesses of the participants of military actions, this data on Russian military equipment on the territory of Ukraine. There's the evidence and proof that on the territory of Russia they organize, they arm, they finance big groups of the militants and mercenaries which are then sent across the border, and that is done with the direct support of Russian authorities using the system of regional military commissariats who are recruiting and training these militants. There is an expert analysis which proves direct economic damage caused by this war to Russian budget, Russian economy, actually for the pocket of all Russian citizens.
In this report, there are several sections in which we analyzed all those things which I mentioned. One of the key chapters is devoted to the bringing back of Crimea. We have analyzed the rhetoric used by Putin from the first day to this very moment, and we have realized that rhetoric has changed radically. In Ukraine, you know this quite well, while Russian society does not notice it. From the very beginning, he mentioned that there was exclusively local self-defense. People who acted there, who were dressed in Russian-style military uniform, but without signs on it, and they blocked all the airports, public buildings, etc. But later he recognized that was Russian special forces, and they were under command of Vladimir Putin fully. We involved evidences of those who participated in this campaign and confession of the commander of Russian military navy, Black Sea Navy, and unfortunately there are evidences that my country, led by Vladimir Putin, has violated its commitments under Budapest Memorandum and other international treaties about friendly relations between Ukraine and Russia. Unfortunately, Putin has totally destroyed the international reputation of my country. In Budapest Memorandum, the Russian Federation not just made commitment to recognize territorial integrity of Ukraine, but also it committed to become a guarantor of the territorial integrity of Ukraine. Ukraine has paid its price for this. It voluntarily suspended and surrendered its nuclear arsenal, and I can mention just few countries in the human history. This was just Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan who did the same, and they promised they promised assistance to Ukraine in case of any harmful situation, and we believe that Crimean blood adventure is a trait to Ukrainian people, and I believe that that Russia has to restore Budapest Memorandum and become a friend of Ukraine. Putin will become known in Russian history who spoiled relations with Ukraine and made it our enemy. I think this will be the condemnation, historic condemnation of Vladimir Putin. Here also you can find confessions of those who participated in combat operations. On page 20 you can find evidence and proof and confession by airborne soldier from Ulyanovsk. He participated in Crimean operations. They isolated public buildings in Crimea, and they were he was dressed in the uniform of Ukrainian law enforcement soldier, and for participation in that very operation he was awarded special medal for bringing Crimea back to Russia. And here you can see his picture in Russian military uniform. Then he came back to Ulyanovsk. He came back home, he got married, and then in August he was sent back to the east of Ukraine. They had to suppress fire points of Ukrainian servicemen. He was heavily wounded and lost his leg. Also here in this report we provide confession by Russian serviceman Hakhlov, who confirmed that he was deployed, his unit was deployed in Ukraine, and he confessed that he participated in changing numbers in the heavy weaponry which was supplied from Russian territory to Ukrainian territory. It's rather difficult to prove the presence of Russian heavy weaponry in Ukraine. I believe that this evidence produced by Hakhlov is of great importance. Russian separatists usually participate in combats with Russian machinery, and similar weaponry is present also in Ukrainian military forces, and sometimes commandment says that allegedly this heavy weaponry was conquered in course of combat from Ukrainian military servicemen, and nevertheless we managed to collect evidence that those heavy weaponry was imported from the territory of Russia to territory of Ukraine. Specifically, this is true about Tornado S system. Tornado S system This is heavy weaponry which is exclusively produced by Russia, and it never had been imported to other countries. The fact that Tornado S was mentioned in Minsk agreements, and those Minsk agreements were signed by Russian representatives. I think this is the proof that separatists fight using Russian heavy weaponry. And I would remind you that Minsk agreements were about delineation line between Ukrainian separatists, allegedly Ukrainian separatists, and Ukrainian army, and the signature of Russian representative under the fact that Tornado S was used is the proof that they know about these systems. Then in our report you can see a screenshot from Obronna Street in Lugansk, where Panzer S1 system is shown against a billboard where the leaders of so-called Novorossiya could be recognized. You can recognize Platnitsky, who is dead now, then Mr. Zakharchenko, leader of so-called Donetsk People's Republic. Panzer S1 system is produced in Russia. It was imported to some countries, but we insist that this system could not be imported to Ukraine without special permit from Russia, and because there are no such country which uses this heavy weaponry without special permit of Russian Federation. Also, there is a special section devoted to the Russian mercenaries in the east of Ukraine, which sometimes are called by Russian mass media as volunteers, but they are mercenaries because they are enrolled, they are trained, they are armored in the territory of Russia, and when they are deployed in the front line, they immediately become crimes under the 350th article of the Russian Criminal Code, which prohibits this mission of a mercenary. And there is another special section devoted to Kadyrov's men in the east of Ukraine. There is so-called battalion Death Battalion, which we believe is directly subordinated to Kadyrov, and part of its membership comprises those militants who participated in military actions in Chechnya. Then via groups subordinated to Kadyrov, they become part of the Ministry of the Interior of Russian Federation, but this is personal guard of Ruslan Kadyrov, and now they are participating in combats in eastern Ukraine. In our report, we present confession of Anti-Blood Hanov and his ID, which was issued for him by so-called Donetsk Republic leadership. Nevertheless, he is active officer of Russian police forces of its Chechen unit.
Всі.
This is the section on the cost of war for Russia. The section which analyzes the damage caused by war to Russian economy, the damage which is provoked by direct participation of Russian military units, and we draw your attention that Western sanctions against Russia damage Russian economy, and anti-sanctions of Putin also damage, first of all, Russian economy, because they provoke the growth of prices and inflation. Our task is to disseminate that report. Our task is in Russia, to Russian population. We want to achieve that the majority of Russian citizens read the report. On the 12th of, starting from the 12th of May, we started raising money to publish a big circulation of this report. We prepare a big campaign in Russia to disseminate the report in Russian society. In 2 weeks, this report was read by about 1,500 Russian citizens. These are active Russians, those people who are used to getting information from internet. But for us, this is too little. Our task is that not just active part of the Russian society reads the report, but our task is we want this report to reach those people who are used to getting information from official newspapers, from state TV, those who are used to believing Putin. Our task is to make these people doubt. Our task is to make these people think. We are conducting not so much political but educational work. We are trying to educate and the critical attitude to Russian authorities in Russian society, and also the understanding by Russian society that they shouldn't believe everything that the TV says. One is said, other things is done. Here are facts, here's evidence. We understand that that is a long work and it will not bring fast fruit, but we understand that if we do not do it, it will be impossible to achieve any changes in our country. We understand that this work is connected to many risks. We understand that the volunteers who will participate in dissemination of the report will see the opposition of police, of provocators, aggressive provocators, those who you call titushkis. We understand that the discussion with our target audience, with our citizens, could be very emotional, maybe very aggressive, because people are brainwashed. But that is the work we have to do. Without that work, Russia will not become the country for which Nemtsov was fighting, for which Nemtsov gave his life, the country about which Nemtsov was dreaming. That is the work that we have to do and we will continue to do. We do hope that this work will bring results. We hope that we will manage to reach our citizens. We want to believe that we'll be able to break this wall of propaganda, and we will achieve significant changes in our country so that Russia becomes really free, civilized European country. The task of which is to ensure a normal, comfortable life for their citizens, which our neighbors will not be afraid of but will respect. I'm ready to answer your questions. If there are questions, raise your hands. Just introduce yourselves. Narodnaya newspaper. I heard, Ilya, that the authorities in Moscow want to speed up the parliamentary elections. Is that because the rating is going down while it's still high? They want to preserve the power. Is that so? I have a somewhat different assessment. They are trying to have elections not in winter, but in the beginning of autumn. Move them from December to September. It's a couple of months. most probably the authorities want to conduct the campaign, election campaign in summer, not in autumn. Summer is the period of time when people are not interested in politics, even though August is the most dramatic month for Russia. But people prefer not to think about politics in summer. They think about dachas, about vacations. And Kremlin technologists probably want to decrease the politicization of the campaign to make the life for opposition more difficult. Well, we're ready for that. Even though the decision hasn't been made, we acted in that. The most successful campaigns for opposition were in such conditions. When Navalny was running to the position of the mayor of Moscow, there was a big aggressive counteraction. Then RPR-PARNAS campaign led by Nemtsov was also done in summer. So despite all these difficulties, we are getting ready for such developments. Any other questions? Voice of Crimea. How could Ukraine and Russia resolve the situation around Crimea? The task number one, in order to resolve the problem of Crimea, the political regime should change in Russia. We understand while Putin is in power, Crimea will be a block in relations between Russia and Ukraine. While Putin is in power, we will not be able to resolve that problem. The new Russian authorities that will replace Putin will have to address this problem. Crimea was annexed in criminal manner. It was occupation, actually. But we understand that on the territory of Crimea, there are many people who supported this operation. To ignore the position of these people is very dangerous. That can lead to bloodshed. And the main task in future negotiations between Russian and Ukrainian authorities should be not to allow bloodshed and to achieve the compromise. It's difficult to forecast how these negotiations will be going on. It will be in political situation which is impossible to forecast, but I believe that one of possible options, one of the possible way outs of the crisis could be creation of the territory in Crimea, which will be covered by the sovereignty of Russia and sovereignty of Ukraine, if that suits Ukrainian friends, and if this guarantees that the blood is not shed, to create such Russian-Ukrainian Hong Kong. If that option is normally and friendly perceived by Ukrainian society, then I'm sure we will be able to convince Russian society that this compromise is possible. But it looks like just trying to guess. Your Ukrainian colleagues in Russia want me to give the ready answers, but there are no ready answers. It is important to know what the conditions will be, and the conditions are not there, and we are working now on the big risk to create such conditions. And the question from UCMC. Aren't you afraid to live in Russia? Do I look scared? I believe not, and in Ukraine. I live in my country. I believe it's humiliating in my country to be afraid if you're not doing anything criminal. I'm a Russian patriot. I love my country, and I wish all the best to my country. All I do is directed to protect national interests of Russia. All I'm doing is directed to making Russia a normal, civilized country that we can be proud of. No, I don't want to be afraid, and I'm not afraid. I'm not planning to hide to run away, to immigrate. I'm not planning to have security. I live like I live. This is my country. I'm not planning to go underground just because the power was seized by people who believe themselves to be gods. The next question is also from UCMC. I'm Varvara Shmagalova. I would like to thank you for the work that you are doing. And my question is a question about values, more than about specific things. What you're planning to do, what you're doing is related to democratic values of society, to explain to people, to show, to disseminate information. But in that, there's the research of Levada Center, which is called Homo Sovieticus. I believe that's a research which says that Russian society still believes in Soviet values, the paternalism, the dignity based on the power of the state, and so on. Do you believe whether these democratic measures be effective in the society which does not accept democracy and the values of the society are authoritarian? Thank you for the question. It is very important, and there are no simple answers to that. I understand perfectly well that the values that we offer to Russian society are not understood by Russian society. I understand that the psychological atmosphere of Russian society, the psychological atmosphere which is imposed on the Russian society by Russian authorities, is very toxic for the values which we offer to Russian society. But I believe in progress. I believe in development of human civilization. I believe that it is impossible to stop the development of history, and Ukrainian history demonstrates it very brightly. After Orange Revolution of 2004 and after unsuccessful experiment of Yushchenko, it looked like everything went back, and pro-European opposition will hardly be able to succeed in the nearest historic future. But the history demonstrated differently. The role of personality in history is important, but it is more important to see the historic trends which are based on big foundation. I believe that Russia is a European country. I believe that Russia is a European culture. I believe that Russia will inevitably be moving in this direction. Our task is to speed up this process, because life is short. I think pragmatically, I have to live in Russia. I will have children who will live in Russia. I want them to live not in fighting. I want them to live in normal state, and that is why I put all the efforts to speed up this process. We're trying to explain to people that liberal democratic values, which have become so common in Europe, they are beneficial for an average citizen. These are not abstract values. These are values which correspond to the interests of common people. I have an uncle in Tambov region. They have small farm, pigs, they had a cow, and very often we were arguing with him. He's criticizing Democrats for the relations with Europe, with America. In Europe, they have all these awful values. They have women with beards. He does not talk about Verka Serdyuchka somehow. And we have very interesting discussion with him. I say, look, do you want not to pay bribes? Do you want not to have raidership because he has a good farm and they're trying to take it away from him and he's trying to defend, to protect it? He says, yes, I want. He says, do you want the TV to tell you the truth so that they do not tell you fables about how much you grow, how much you milk. You see it all yourself, and you understand that what you hear is not what you see. They tell you every time about big prosperity, but you see it. And they say, do you want them to tell you the truth? He says, yeah, it would be good. And I say, do you want to elect the authorities so that they do not appoint some criminals who are fighting, so that you yourselves can elect the authorities who would protect your interests? He says, yeah, it would be good. I say, but you're a Democrat. He says, never call me that again. So the words are discredited. The words, the definitions, our task is to explain to people what is the content, meaning of the words that they mistrust, to explain how in practice the mechanism of democracy can ensure high standard of life in the country, to explain that when the country is governed from one place, a big state is governed from one place, it's bad for everyone, to explain that self-government, decentralization is good for Russian regions, to explain when people are not looking for getting instructions from Moscow, but they resolve their problems themselves. Such problems are resolved much more efficiently. The task is very complicated. You cannot imagine how complicated. Maybe you do imagine, because Ukraine has done that and is still doing it. But if we do not resolve that problem, nothing will change in Russia, because our key task is not to replace one politician by others, to replace Putin by Navalny, Medvedev by Kasyanov. It's not our task. Our task is to change the system, to form principally new political system in Russia, which will guarantee political competition and the replacement of power. If the authorities are good, but they are for life, they do not correspond to the interests of people. We need to find words so that people understand what we mean.
Ну да.
Прошу.
Good afternoon, I'm Yuri Artemoshenko. Currently, we have two Russian servicemen from special forces, and they are in our military hospital. Actually, it looks like Russia has rejected from them. And what do Russian servicemen think about them? Probably you know what people say in Russia, that Putin never gives up and rejects from his people. Russia, this is not mentioned in the central mass media and at the federal level. You can find this in websites, in blogs, and in some newspapers with low circulation. Sometimes it is mentioned that they were retired servicemen. Actually, the problem is that there are no mechanisms in Russian society allowing to launch such discussion at broad public level. There is some 100,000 people who read our documents, who understand what's going on. But in order to stir up people and to stimulate them to ask questions to the head of the state, we need to have the critical mass of those who are ready to ask such questions. Unfortunately, the information about that two servicemen came late when the report was already published, but I do not think this is the last issue of this report. At the cover, you can read text written by Boris Nemtsov, and actually here he in this text, he made a prophecy directly related to these two servicemen, and addressing to Russian servicemen, he wrote that Putin and his commanders will reject from you any second, and they would say that they never had sent you to this warfare, and relatives, or your relatives, would never find truth if something would happen to you. So this is direct prophecy about what had happened to those two servicemen, and in those cases, when something happens to Russian citizens, either they are captured, whether they are brought to jail, and whether they are arrested, whether they are killed, wounded, etc., he always immediately rejects from them and says that they are not part of Russia. This is the big difference between us and Putin, because for us, for him, these human lives value nothing if national interests are on stake, so-called Russian interests. But while we believe that if we need to sacrifice people, then these are not the Russian interests. I believe that that two servicemen who were captured here in Ukraine, they know what is the price of Putin words and what is real value of Putin words, and I believe that Russian society also should know this, maybe not paying such a high price. Could you please explain more for Ukrainian journalists how Russian opposition forces will try to come to power? In democratic opposition, we have three directions of our activities. The first and the most important type of activity is education, information, and journalist investigations about all the accounts of that so-called patriots, information about that democratic institutions which are provided by Russian constitution. This is very important and very difficult work. The second type of our activity, these are street protest actions. The agenda of Russian official policy is organized in the way that you may attract the problem to, you may attract attention to any problem only via the street event, street rally, and Russian authorities very painfully react to such street rallies. They expect to have Maidan any moment. Nevertheless, our intention is not to conquer the power by force means. Our major intention is to ensure peaceful transfer of power and to prevent any civil conflict, which is so much provoked by Putin, because raising that aggression in society, he wants to prevent peaceful transfer of power in the future. And the third type of our activity is participation in elections. In order to be able to participate in elections, we should consolidate democratic forces in Russian society. And unfortunately, murder of Nemtsov has become a possibility to look at the situation more carefully. We came to understanding that in case we are not highly consolidated, we would be destroyed one by one. And Nemtsov always used to joke that competition in Russian opposition is a competition for the seat in jail. And it appeared that this competition is even more severe. This is actually the competition for the ballot with which you will be shot. And now our party, RPR-PARNAS, and which was created and established by Nemtsov and now is led by Mr. Kasyanov. We have a coalition with Mr. Navalny, with Democratic Alliance, and some other smaller democratic and liberal organizations. We have formed a coalition, and we currently are campaigning for the elections to the State Duma, and our major objective is to become members of this Russian parliament, and appearance of the oppositional faction, oppositional democratic faction in the parliament may create precondition for peaceful transfer of power, and in general presence of democratic opposition in official policy may change the situation. Our tactical task is participation in local elections in Kostромskaya region, Kalushskaya and Novosibirskaya regions. Via primaries, we form the list for these elections, and we hope that we will succeed in getting access to these elections, because there are some barriers for this. If they will try to hinder our participation in elections, we will apply street rallies as a tactic. We believe that murder of Boris Nemtsov will awake some political elites, and they will realize that current situation in Russian policy has become dangerous, not just for politicians, oppositional politicians, but for those who work in legal authorities and who are loyal to the authorities today. And I hope that those who work for Kremlin, they start realizing this. Nevertheless, probably some of them have such attitude that I am optimist without any ground. There are no further questions. Thank you very much, Ilya. We wish you all